biggest problem, and some BLM lands that we're actually addressing. But it's been 100 years of mismanagement, and it's going to take time and money, and so, yeah.
And just to jump off that, because Heidi's making such an important point, right? We have to acknowledge the state controls some lands, the federal government controls some lands, right? It's complicated, we know that. But let's be honest with ourselves. We had Joe Biden as president for 4 years. Was it getting better under him? Right? I mean, like, I've got to watch my language. This person in the White House is not going to be there for whatever he may think for that much longer, right? Hopefully we'll get a better government. In the meantime, we've got to take care of what we can take care of for ourselves here in the state, and we'll get a better federal government. We can work with them. You know, and this is not a quick fix, right? This is a long-term commitment. That's why I said, like, I think we can fix the insurance markets in a couple of years. I think it'll take longer to bring the fire risk down, but we've got to get started and do what we can and commit for the long haul.
You keep talking about the fires in the LA area. Well, we all seem very affected by the fires in Paradise.
Yeah.
And that's what this area really thinks about.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. All I can say is those fires were the galvanizing event for me. But as I was saying, I really have come to deeply appreciate what you are saying, that we have had devastating fires before, and you've all been living with this risk for a long time, and quite frankly have not been heard enough. And I do commit to not just staying in regular touch, but really hearing and addressing these issues.
In your opinion, has PG&E stepped up in a meaningful way? And as insurance commissioner, is there a role for ensuring they do?
So I want to point out that if you count the ampersand, PG&E is actually a 4-letter word. They're not too popular in San Francisco. Yeah, it's a complicated question. I don't have a great answer, because what you're asking is, are they doing enough? I think we know that PG&E has suffered from many years of mismanagement and failure to invest properly. It is my impression that they are investing much more seriously now in terms of undergrounding the lines, in terms of fixing the infrastructure, but they have a gigantic amount of infrastructure to address. And I honestly can't tell you whether I think they are doing enough. But the reason I focus less on the source of the spark and more on the tinder, if you will, is there's always going to be a spark. Even if PG&E were magically to fix all, underground its lines and replace all of its transmission and infrastructure and so forth, some jackass is going to light a match somewhere, or even just a lightning strike. The mathematical models are very clear. You can't fight catastrophic wildfires by trying to suppress all the sources. You have to responsibly thin the burning material, and of course have firefighting infrastructure, so that when you do get these fires, they don't go the way that they have been going.
Yeah, we have one more there.
Yeah, when you get to the position of commissioner, and I hope you do.
Thank you.
How will you be able to make change? Does it have to go through state legislature, or you say you can do these things, but what's it going to take to do it?
So it's very good.
Say you want just say one thing. You want one bill to do one thing. How does it go about, and how long would it take?
It's a very good question. I'm glad you asked it, because I think it's important to understand. So the Department of Insurance regulates all insurance to a point. I'm going to explain that in a second. Property and casualty, it regulates very, very rigorously, very heavily. Life insurance, health insurance, believe it or not, actually the Department of Insurance has very little to do. And if anybody's interested, I won't go deeper in that in the same, if anybody's interested, we can talk more about that. But when it comes to property and casualty, we're talking about homeowners obviously, but all property and casualty, most of the rules that determine how insurance operates in the state of California are set by the Department of Insurance. Now, the legislature can certainly play a complementary role and does play a complementary role, but the language of Proposition 103 specifically says that the legislature can only pass laws that quote unquote further the purpose of Proposition 103. And the way that's been interpreted and the way the regulatory system has been set up in the wake of Prop 103, most of the action takes place through the Department of Insurance. Ultimately, it is the insurance commissioner that makes the determination of the promulgation, interpretation, and enforcement of regulation. So, to be clear, there are 1,400 people who work in the Department of Insurance. I don't want you to think that you walk in and you're an emperor on day one. Obviously, that's not how it works. You have staff, there's process, procedure, and so forth, and a bureaucracy that needs to be dealt with. But it is ultimately the responsibility of the insurance commissioner. And those regulations are what controls the lion's share of the rules of how property and casualty operates in California. And I spend a lot of time thinking hard about my policy platform to make sure that it really does reflect what the insurance commissioner can do within the Department of Insurance. So that's why this role is so important.
Let me ask you, I think we have a few more minutes. Let me ask you one. You're taking on a lot of responsibility here. You're saying you have that power. That will be fun to watch, right? Because
Fun for you.
It's tricky, yeah.
Well, you'll be in Congress then.
So for our community here, I know for the communities who've been through serious wildfires and lost a lot of homes, their insurance problems are the after effects, sort of what you talked about, how much are they getting paid to rebuild and so on. For those of us here, we what really is hitting us are the rates, that it just keep going up astronomically, even though we're doing more and more work, putting in more and more money, doing more work around our homes. It's astronomical. It's going to push people on fixed incomes, for example, it's going to push them out of their homes. That's our serious concern. So it feels like maybe there's something broken in the system. And when I was doing research with my group earlier, we could see that the insurance companies, you talked about this, after the big Southern California fires, they said it used up 10 years. They of course save in advance for these big things, so they're supposed to be prepared for multiple insurance crises. It took up 10 years of their savings to pay out from that company. They have a separate report, their investment report, their financial filings, and we took out a quote from that report that said, our investments are doing fine. We haven't lost a dime. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, that to me sounds like a broken business model. Is there something you could do or think you should do as insurance commissioner to look at that model and say, this isn't functional, that investment piece where they're making their profits and they have a certain expectation every year doesn't get touched, is there something more we can require of them to use more of those investments to make sure that the rates aren't so astronomical for everyday people?
So let me address that from a couple different angles. One angle is the reason you need to have a really competitive insurance market with strong regulation to hold insurance companies accountable is precisely so that you have that discipline of insurance companies competing against one another, right? Ultimately, it's the insurance, in any market, it's the companies that keep each other honest. And then you have to make sure that you set the rules and enforce the rules in such a way that the companies never have power over customers. And so if you get that right, then you have a market that is functioning as best it can, and then we have the whole conversation of, okay, then you have to bring down the cost. Now, let me address your question though from a different angle, because you specifically raised the point about the investments that insurance companies make. I want to take a couple minutes and explain. I'm putting on my financial analyst hat now.
No, we're coming up on time, so I did that. So go ahead and finish.
Okay.
This will be our last question.
Okay, let me explain the financial model of an insurance company. So the way insurance companies make money is two ways. They make money on any underwriting profit that they make, and then they make money on their investments. That's normal. That's perfectly reasonable. When I talk about making a reasonable profit, let me step you through how I think about that. For a financial company like an insurance company, you have to think in terms of a return on their capital. That's how you think about it. What rate of return are they making? So whenever you think about an insurance, a business that way, you have to look at the balance sheet. You want, from an insurance company, on the one hand, for the assets of a balance sheet, of an insurance company, you want to be conservatively capitalized. You don't want them taking too much risk. You don't want them taking too much leverage. You want them to have investments that are safe and sound, right? Because you're depending on them to be able to pay in thick and thin. You don't want them taking too much risk. Conservatively capitalized. On the liability side, you want them to be what's called appropriately reserved. Reserves are what you set aside for what you think you're going to lose. I say appropriately because if you reserve too little, that means you're not reserving enough for big catastrophes. That's obviously bad. But if you reserve too much, you're basically lying about how much money you're making. If you reserve too much, you get what's called favorable development over time, which means, oh, it turns out we made more money than we thought because things didn't turn out as bad as we thought they were. Now, this is obviously not a precise science, but this is an important part of the regulation. You want to be conservatively capitalized, appropriately reserved. So long as you've got that regulation in place to make sure that's the case, that gets to your question about how they're using their investments. Then you want the insurance companies, on average, to make a reasonable rate of return. What's a reasonable rate of return? This is a bit squishy, it's a range, not a point. But I would say 8, 9, 10, 11% sort of return on their equity capital is a reasonable rate of return. That's making their cost of capital. That allows the industry to operate in a healthy way without making too much money, right? And making sure, again, conservatively capitalized, appropriately reserved. And then the way they make that money is some mix of their operating profit from underwriting, which can often be almost nothing, actually. So that can work for them so long as they're making money on their investment side. But so long as you're regulating and managing that, you have an insurance industry that is operating in a sound and sustainable and appropriate way. And then you get back to having to have a competitive market, strong regulation, and then you have to address bringing the cost down.
Thank you so much. That was a big one. Thank you. Let's give him a big round of applause. Patrick,
Thank you so much.
you for coming up here.
Thank you. And first of all, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to come and have this conversation. It's a great conversation. I love it. I've learned from you. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Secondly, for those of you who are delegates in the Democratic Party or who know delegates in the Democratic Party, I would love your support in the upcoming convention next month. And of course, please tell folks about me. And thank you so much for your time and your engagement.
Thank you. Do you have a webpage?
Oh yes, Patrick Wolf, WOLFF, patrickwolf.com. And if elected insurance commissioner, I will be a wolf on your side. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's up? Oh yes, and my digital director is reminding me that you can follow me on social media, Wolf, WOLFF, Wolf on your side. Thank you so much.
Thank you.